Hey everyone, welcome to Cinema Safari. Today we're talking about how to make a killing. How to Make a Killing was written and directed by John Patton Ford, starring Glenn Powell. It's loosely based off of the 1949 British film Kind Hearts and Coronets, which was a film that co-starred Alec Guinness. So stick with us as we dive into how to make a killing. So How to Make a Killing is a black comedy thriller film written and directed by John Patton Ford, loosely inspired off of Kind Hearts and Coronets. We see Glenn Powell in the leading role alongside Margaret Qualley, Jessica Henwick, Bill Camp, Zach Woods, Topher Grace, and Ed Harris in supporting roles. Now, this film is there were definitely pros and cons. Definitely a lot of mixed reaction from audiences and critics. For me, I thought the biggest pro for the film was the kind of themes of the film. It was very similar to that the film it was inspired off of. Um, a lot of like the social impacts, the social themes of the film that the original film explored. A lot of that was still kind of involved with the storyline and plot for this film, which I liked. Glenn Powell's performance and his specific development throughout the film, I thought was definitely something that was more on the positive side of the film. Um, so for those who have seen the film, it starts off with him already in prison talking to a priest played by Topher Grace about his journey to this point and how he ended up in prison. So basically, the plot for this film, he kind of realizes he's part of this family, and if he kills all of them, he gets, I think, $28 billion. So that's basically it. And we see throughout the film how he kills each family member to, eventually become the sole heir to this fortune. And how he specifically developed throughout the film as his character, I thought was pretty interesting. Definitely a good part of the film. A lot of the performances of the supporting cast were definitely underused. This was a great cast. I got Mark Qualley, Ed Harris, Topher Grace, some other really good cast members playing some of the other family members that he does kill throughout the film, who I don't recall off the top of my head, but a great cast, and all of them, for the most part, were underused. The sequence with Ed Harris, small part of the film, but I thought that was actually a really good part of the film. Ed Harris, always great. So maybe with that exception, Margaret Qualley, I feel, was definitely underused in the film, or just the way her character was written. Maybe I don't know if it was more that or just like I don't know, but like her character specifically just felt out of place for a lot of the film, or underused, or just misplaced, not miscast, misplaced maybe. I don't know. There was just something weird about a lot of the time she was on the screen. You just felt awkward. I don't know, to me, but I don't know, because she's a great actress. I love a lot of the work she's done in the past. Just something awkward about a lot of the time you saw her on screen. I don't know. That might have just been me. Something this film, it is, there's a lot of similarities between this film and that original film. the original film with Alec Guinness, it's still considered one of the best like comedy satirical films of all time. Very important in the industry. Still very relevant today, and I think having had this film, How to Make a Killing, that was made that is basically inspired by that film, making it for today's audience, still shows that that film is still very relevant, and a lot of the like social issues that are presented in that film that are also presented in How to Make a Killing are still very relevant in today's society, which I think is a good highlight for this film, good part of the film, and keeping it relevant. And goes to show that a lot of these issues are still relevant. And I think that's also another thing that this film does well. A lot of like the social like issues and commentary, the way this film is made, is very, makes it very thought provoking, and a lot of it is stuff that is portrayed to the audience as still relevant to certain things that we're dealing with socially with things in today's society. So I think that was definitely a pro for the film. Something this film, Had Me Killing, didn't really succeed in, as opposed to that original film. It's a black comedy film, so like you have that side of silliness, the comedy aspect of the film, which it did have, but on the other side of things, there were like killing serious moments that were also there, but it didn't really. It had both of those, but it didn't really. It kind of just needed to like kind of pick one and run with it, and I think it would have helped make the film stronger. Where you got a lot of that silliness with the killings and stuff like that, especially like with Glenn Powell's character and development throughout the film. A lot of the comedy came from that and his performance, I think. And some of the killings that he came up with and the ways he killed certain family members. But then you also have the serious side of things that the film had. But I think it kind of just needed to lean more towards one and kind of run that way, which would have helped make the films a little stronger, because you got both, but it kind of just hopped back and forth too much, I think, which kind of, as an audience member, as a viewer, it kind of made it a little awkward, not as enjoyable, because you're like, yeah, this comedy moments, oh, we're jumping right over to this, back to comedy, back to this. Kind of made it a little hard to watch in that aspect, that sense of things. Overall, I still enjoyed it. I think it's a film that I would possibly rewatch as opposed to some other films, especially some stuff that's come out this year so far. As like a mystery film, it is one of those films where like you watch it for the first time to realize, to see like how it's going to play out, and how it ends up in the end. Is he going to die? Is he not? Like, what's going to happen? So after the first watch, you know exactly what's going to happen. So it's one of those films that if you do rewatch it, it might be to like, watch certain things more closely to see what you missed, stuff like that. But it was an enjoyable watch, I think. I don't think it was necessarily the greatest film because of some of those cons, negative things that I did go over, but overall, it was still enjoyable. Like, I had a lot of laughs with it. The comedy aspects that it does have were enjoyable. Just the fact that like it did switch over a lot, and wasn't necessarily the most like steady plot when it comes to like comedy or like more of the drama side of things. It was still a lot of fun, and I did have a lot of laughs with it. So it's definitely something I would go rewatch, I think, compared to some other films that have come out recently. So in that aspect, it definitely was worth it, I think, and definitely worth the rewatch too, at least for me. Um, Another thing I will say that when I was talking with a couple other people who also saw it, Glenn Powell's character, like it kind of feels like some of the more recent characters he's been playing kind of feel very similar, or starting to feel similar, kind of like comparing him to like Jason Statham, who has been in a lot of movies recently, like The Beekeeper, some other things that he's done, where he kind of plays the same character in each movie. They just have like different jobs, but they end up just being, he, like kills people and becomes like that kind of person. Um, and it kind of feels like Glenn Powell is sort of heading in that direction with some of the more recent things he's done. The Running Man, great movie. The Hitman he did a couple years ago on Netflix, great movie. I think that was, one of his stronger performances that really, brought him up as like a leading actor, in my opinion. So he's had like some really strong performances. Nothing against that. I definitely think he is a great leading man, great actor, great performer. But I feel like he is kind of heading in that direction a little with some of the roles that he is playing. Um, so hopefully, he doesn't continue to go down the road, because I personally think he is a great performer, and like he has like a lot of great performances in these films. It's just kind of starting to feel like that with some of the like stories that he has been involved in. But again, that might just be me. I'm not sure. But overall, I thought this was a good film. It did have the pros and cons, positives and negatives. It wasn't like the strongest film of the years, but it definitely was a fun watch, definitely entertaining. So I definitely recommend taking a look at it, and giving it a try, because I think, yeah, it's definitely there. It isn't like the steadiest flow story wise and like plot wise. With the feel of it going from beginning to end. And a lot of people did have like a issue with the ending, I think. Not to spoil anything, but how he did stuff that happened, and ultimately what he decided to do. A lot of people weren't huge fans of it. But at the same time, it was interesting because it wasn't really what we were expecting. So I think that personally, I think that was another like positive thing for the film in a sense, because a lot of the films expect a lot of movies, especially recently, you kind of know what you're expecting for the ending, know where you're headed, and you really like kind of can guess where a movie's headed, how it's going to end. And in this film, I think maybe some people knew what to expect, but at the same time, you were hoping for something else, but you got this. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a big conversation that we could have for, people could have. That could probably be a whole nother episode. But I liked it. I thought it was an interesting ending. It wasn't really what we were expecting, which kind of felt like a interesting thing, a fresh take as compared to a lot of movies recently. So I thought that was a good thing. But I'd be curious to hear what other people think. So with that, we are going to wrap up today's episode. So How to Make a Killing, definitely a fun watch. Definitely recommend giving it a watch, giving it a chance. It wasn't the best, like the strongest film, but I think that it was definitely, it had its moments. It had good comedy, even though like I feel like it could have leaned more into either the comedy or the seriousness. one or the other, as opposed to keeping both and kind of hopping back and forth. It would have made it a stronger film, I think. But what we got was entertaining to watch, and I enjoyed it. I watched it a couple times already, and it's one of those films that I would genuinely probably go back, and if I would definitely rewatch it. I think it's one of those movies that, compared to some others that I've seen recently, where I would genuinely go out of my way to maybe rewatch it, especially if I needed like something that was a little more comedic, because there's definitely a lot of it. There's parts of it that aren't as comedic, but there's definitely a lot that is comedic as well. So it's definitely a film that I would definitely rewatch, and I think that people should definitely give it a shot. And I'd love to know what you all think about it. So make sure you comment on today's episode, subscribe if you're not already, follow us on social media. And as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for your support, and we will see you next time.